Hey, welcome to a episode of MINI BTP. This is where we just take one topic and just do a little quick hitter. I'm Brandon Mileski, former Golden Gopher. Pat Micheletti is with me as well. Pat, before we get to our topic, can you tell us about one of our sponsors here on Beyond the Pod?
I would love to. Are you on a beer league hockey team? Check out our contest page at kfan.com for a chance to get yourself sponsored by Michelob Golden Light.
That sounds exciting to me. Pat, the news came down yesterday that Calen Addison was traded to the San Jose Sharks. The Wild then went and acquired Zach Bogosian from the Tampa Bay Lightning. We'll talk about the Calen Addison side of this first. You and I did a mini BTP this summer on Calen Addison and whether he'd be able to take a jump up. Last year, great on the power play, not great defensively, 5-on-5. There were questions about whether he could improve. And 12 games in, the Minnesota Wild, I guess, decided to give up on him. What do you think of the trade?
Well, I think you and I can go back, 2 years, 3 years. And we always talked about in the playoffs and our defensemen getting, hit and hit and hit, and we didn't have enough size back there. But then you had Addison, right? And you have a kid who is the size of Jared Spurgeon, and you start to wonder, is that you got two of those guys? How can it work? Well, Addison has some skill. There's no question about it. He's got the skill level. He can skate. He can handle the puck. Play the power play. But I think ultimately the other parts of his game haven't come to fruition yet. And if you're the Minnesota Wild, and you're in the Western Conference, and your hopes are to make the playoffs again, you still haven't addressed the issue of what are you going to do when you get in the playoffs again and you start getting hit and all of that. So I think Billy did good on him for making the move, and that's where we are today.
Yeah, for Calen, he's going to have an opportunity to play a little bit more
Yeah.
in San Jose than he would here. Pat, over the years, we've talked a lot about tweeners, right? Like
Yeah.
a guy like a Jordan Schrader, where
Yeah.
skilled player, he can skate, but he kind of has to be in a top six role because he can't play your typical bottom six role in terms of forechecking, the physical aspect, killing penalties. And I feel like Calen Addison, and he's still 23, so there's still time for him to grow. But I feel like he's in that tweener area, Pat, where he's good on the power play.
Yep.
He's got some offensive skill, but he's not good defensively enough to play in your top four. But then he doesn't really fit the role of what you want in a third pairing, right? Like, and now that they're going to have Jared Spurgeon coming back, that was going to push Calen Addison out of your top four. So now, when you want your third pairing, you want guys who can kill penalties, which has been a struggle for this team. The penalty kill has been bad. You need guys who can take on third, fourth liners for other teams, guys with size in front of your net, battle in corners, and he can't really do that. So he was just kind of always, to me, in kind of that no man's land, Pat.
Right. And when you're assessing this team and the circumstances that they have in front of them in terms of no money, you have to say, okay, what can we do to be competitive, make the playoffs, and what is the best scenario for our team heading into the playoffs? What do we need? Well, we needed to get bigger on defense. Now they've done that with Bogosian. Okay. Is he the answer? He's the answer for 850,000. That you have to put yourself. You're not going to get a big, strong, defenseman, for $3-4 million because you don't have it. And so when you look at the Western Conference, Brandon, and this is why I'm okay with moving Addison and getting Bogosian, is that there are two teams, maybe three, that are above everybody else. Colorado, Vegas. You can put maybe a Dallas or LA in there, but there's those two teams are beatable. So if you're saying to yourself, okay, you know, we're not a great team, but there's not teams that are significantly better than us. You know, Nashville is certainly not, you know, better than Minnesota. Winnipeg is okay. St. Louis is okay. You know, Arizona is up and coming, but you don't know what you're getting out of Arizona.
Yep.
So when you look at the rest of the Western Conference teams, you can make the playoffs. That is the goal, number one, and then you go from there. Who knows what happens in the playoffs? You never know. But so you have that ability, and I think Billy is trying to do the best he can do, knowing that the West is what it is, to get your team a little bit better.
How do you view Calen Addison moving forward now that he's moving away from Minnesota, going to San Jose? The opportunity will be there. I'm sure he'll play a lot more power play. Clearly they lost Erik Karlsson in the offseason. They are having a ton of struggle. So there's a lot of opportunity for a power play defenseman to fit in there. But I think there's a section of the fan base, Pat, that is convinced Calen Addison is going to be a star player someday. And, there's I don't think you're a big analytics guy. I'm not a big analytics guy. I just like to go with the eye test, and I get there can be flaws with that. But I think sometimes people are too invested in analytics and just I think analytics in hockey are flawed to a certain extent, Pat, because there's so many variables on the ice. It's not like baseball where it's individual play within a team play. So you can zone in on analytics a little bit more. Hockey, there's so many variables of who you're playing with, who you're playing against, level of competition. But there's a section of the fan base that thinks, Calen Addison was on this track to be this player, and are convinced he's going to be it. And he's 23, Pat. So I don't like to write a guy off, but I didn't see I know it's just 12 games this year. I thought he played a little better than he did last year, but I did not see a big jump out of him.
You can't analytics maturity, and I don't think some of the plays that he does make defensively, Brandon, are head scratching. Okay, I'll use that term, head scratching, and they go over it with him daily. His biggest thing from the coach's perspective was you got to get better defensively. This game is not that complicated where where you can't figure it out, and especially with the advent of watching yourself and getting things pointed out on video, and it just didn't seem to register, or he didn't want it to register. So I don't want to say he's not the most intelligent player. He may be a hard-headed player in terms of, no, I'm going to do it my way. And it didn't, and they kept telling him, here's how you got to defend. There's a point in time where you take chances, and there's other times where you don't. I don't think that registered with him. I think his function was, I'm going to do it my way. And for those reasons, I think it drove the coaching staff and management crazy a little bit. And here's where we are.
I had a coach once, Pat, that said, if you score 2 goals a game, you don't have to back check, right? And that line always stuck with me. Like, all right, well, it's very hard to score 2 goals a game, but the elite players can get away with not having to do some defensive things because they can produce.
Right.
And in Calen's case, he had his defensive warts. I think people think he's better offensively than he is. I think he's a quality offensive player. He's not a great offensive player, right? Like he would get points because he's on the power play. Like if you're on the power play,
you better get points, right?
You're gonna get second assist, but like he wasn't a guy that was the engine on the power play. He wasn't. They weren't going through him. And 5-on-5, like he's not a great offensive player. He has, I think, some of his skill set to do that.
Yep.
But he wasn't like super productive 5-on-5. So like, I don't think he's as great offensively as people think he is.
Yeah, you coined it perfectly. He's a tweener, and if it's not gonna, you better have something that is your bread and butter. You better, And like some guys make it in this league because you know what? He's a shot blocker, he's a defender, and he can, you know what? You can trust him. Now, okay, what you brought up Addison 5-on-5. There wasn't a lot there offensively. There wasn't anything like, okay, we're putting him out there because he's gonna drive some offense for us when we need a goal. And the power play. Hey, listen, you're on the power play, and he wasn't on the power play the last 15, 20 games of last year. Hence, they brought in Klingberg because it wasn't working out well.
And the last couple games here.
And the last couple
they
games
had Johansson running the point the last 2 games.
Yeah, 5 forwards, right? And so, it gets to the point where, it just ultimately it didn't work. And listen, I hope it does for him. You don't want to see just because the guy's traded and we're gonna sit here and knock him and this, that, and the other thing. That's not Billy did good for him by
he's in a better role. He's in a better spot.
He's in a better spot. He's still young, and maybe another team is going to be able to cultivate him into a better NHL player. But ultimately, with him, and you need size back on defense in the National Hockey League. You just do. The forwards are too big, and they're too strong, and they're too fast. And they
especially when you already have another smaller defenseman,
right? And then let's not forget they still have Alex Goligoski, right?
Yeah.
And who knows what's going to happen with him? We haven't heard his name much, probably because he's on LTIR. But I don't know if there's room for him when he gets back. I don't know what they're going to do. I think another move probably will be coming. Is John Merrill, on that bubble. And listen, they do have a lot of up and coming defensemen, right? Hunt, Rourke, Jack Peart, who's at St. Cloud.
Lambos.
They've Lambos, right?
Who was in that Zucker trade? He ended up being the draft pick they got in that Zucker trade that Addison was acquired in.
So from that perspective, I think they're okay.
All right, Pat. We'll talk to you next week on Beyond the Pod.
Sounds great. Thanks, Brandon.
All right, he's Pat Micheletti. I'm Brandon Mileski. This has been another episode. This has been a mini BTB. We just talked about one topic today. We'll talk to you next week right here on Beyond the Pod. Thank you for listening and watching. Bye.